Kiravel pressed his small body against the cold metal wall and tried to make himself invisible. But his golden fur stood out against the gray corridors like a flame in darkness. And the creatures hunting him could smell his fear. The young Lanari was only 12 cycles old, barely past his first main growth. And this was supposed to be a simple trip with his father to the great trading station called Nexus Prime. But nothing had gone as planned. And now he was alone in the most dangerous place a child could be. His father's words echoed in his mind as he ran through the unfamiliar corridors. If we get separated, find a human embassy. They will protect you. They always protect children. It is their way. But Kira had never seen a human before, and he did not know where the embassy was. And the station was so big that it made his home world's largest city look like a village. And every turn he took seemed to lead him deeper into the dark places where the lights flickered and the decent people did not go. His father's ship had been stopped by station security over some paper problem, some permit that was missing or expired. And while his father argued with the officials, Kira had wandered just a little too far, just for a moment, just to look at a strange creature selling glowing fruits from a cart. When he turned around, his father was gone, lost in the endless crowd of aliens that filled the station's main corridors. And Kira had panicked, running in what he thought was the right direction. But every corridor looked the same, and soon he was completely lost. That was when he first saw the Vrexians. There were 6 of them, lean and hungry looking, with patchy gray fur and long snouts filled with yellow teeth. And they moved through the crowd like sharks through water. And when their red eyes found Kira, they smiled in a way that made his blood turn to ice. He ran, through corridors and down ladders and past doors that hissed open and closed. He ran until his young legs burned and his lungs screamed for air. But every time he looked back, the Vrexians were still there. Not running, just walking, patient and certain. Like they knew he had nowhere to go, and they were right. The corridor he had chosen ended in a wall. A dead end with no doors and no windows and no escape. And when Kira turned around, the 6 Vrexians were blocking the only way out, spreading across the corridor like a net, closing around a fish. The leader of the pack stepped forward, and he was taller than the others, with a scar running down his snout and eyes that held no kindness, no mercy, nothing but cold calculation. Well, the Vrexian said, his voice a harsh rasp that hurt Kira's ears. A little lion cub, all alone, so far from home. What a sad thing. The others laughed, a sound like bones scraping together. Please, Kira whispered, hating how small his voice sounded. I just want to find my father. I am not looking for trouble. Please let me go. The leader tilted his head, and for a moment Kira dared to hope. But then the Vrexian's lips pulled back in a grin that showed every one of his rotting teeth. Let you go, he repeated, as if tasting the words. But little cub, you do not understand. You are worth so much money. Your golden fur, your pretty eyes. There are buyers on the Outer Rim who would pay a fortune for a young Lanari. And we are not in the business of letting money walk away. Kira's heart stopped slavers. He had heard stories about them, whispered tales that parents told to keep their children close, but he had never truly believed them. Never thought such evil could exist in a galaxy that called itself civilized. But here they were, reaching for him with their clawed hands. And there was no one to help, no one to hear, no one to save a small cub from a fate worse than death. His father must be rich, one of the other Vrexians said. Look at his clothes, good fabric, expensive. Maybe we ransom him instead. No, the leader said. Too risky, too many questions. We take him to the ship, sell him quick. Be gone before anyone knows he is missing. There are always buyers for young ones. They moved closer, and Kira could smell their breath, sour and rotten. And he could see the hunger in their eyes. And he knew that if they took him, he would never see his father again. never see his mother or his sisters or his home world with its golden plains and purple sunsets. Something broke inside him, not his spirit, not his hope, but something older. Something that lived in the blood of every Lanari, since the first of his kind had walked the savannas of their home world and roared defiance at the stars. He opened his mouth, and he roared. It was not the roar of a warrior, not the earth-shaking thunder that adult Lanari could produce, but it was loud and high and filled with every drop of fear and rage in his small body. And it echoed through the metal corridors like the cry of something that refused to die quietly. The Rexians flinched back for just a moment, surprised by the noise, and then they laughed again. Harder this time. Listen to the cub, the leader mocked. So fierce, so brave, roaring like he thinks someone will come. Like anyone cares about one little lost cat in the dark places of this station. Save your voice, little one. You will need it for screaming later. They reached for him again. And Kira closed his eyes, and he prayed to every god his people believed in. And he wondered if his father would ever know what happened to him. And then a voice spoke from behind the Rexians. A voice that was calm and quiet, and somehow more terrifying than any roar. Hey! The Rexians turned. And Kira opened his eyes, and standing at the mouth of the corridor was a creature he had never seen before. A creature with pale skin, and no fur, and no claws, and flat teeth, that should have made it look harmless. But there was nothing harmless about the way this creature stood. Nothing harmless about the look in its eyes. And even the Rexian leader took a step backward before he could stop himself. "What are you?" the leader demanded. But his voice had lost some of its confidence. The creature smiled. And it was not a friendly smile. "I am a human," it said. "And you have 5 seconds to walk away from that child." Chief Petty Officer Marcus Cole had been having the kind of day that made a man question every choice that had led him to this moment. He had served 20 years in the United Earth Navy, survived 3 wars and 2 engine failures that should have killed everyone aboard, raised 2 daughters on a Mars colony while their mother worked the asteroid mines, and earned every gray hair on his head through blood and sweat and sacrifice. All he wanted was one quiet day ashore, leave on Nexus Prime. Instead, he had gotten lost in the maintenance tunnels while looking for a shortcut to the human quarter, stepped in something that smelled like death and burned through the sole of his left boot, and discovered that his translation implant was glitching and making everyone sound like they were underwater. He was tired, he was irritated, and he was seriously considering just finding the nearest bar and drinking, until the station started making sense. Then he heard the roar. It came echoing through the metal corridors, bouncing off walls and pipes and equipment. And at first Marcus thought it was some kind of alarm. But then his brain caught up with his ears, and he recognized the sound for what it was. A Lanari roar. Marcus had served alongside Lanari soldiers during the Frontier War, had fought back to back with them against enemies that would haunt his nightmares until the day he died. And he knew their sounds as well as he knew his own heartbeat. That was not a battle roar. That was not a threat display. That was not the thunder of a warrior announcing their presence. That was fear. That was a child. Marcus started running before he even made the conscious decision to move, his tired legs suddenly finding new strength, his irritation burning away like morning fog in the face of something more important. He had 2 daughters back on Mars, 12 and 14 years old. And every time he looked at a scared kid, any species, he saw Emma and Sarah looking back at him, and there was nothing in the universe that could stop him from responding to that sound. The corridors twisted and turned, but the roar had given him direction, and he followed it like a beacon, pushing past maintenance drones and stepping over cables and ignoring the protests of his aching body. He rounded a corner and found them 6 Rexians, lean and mean and blocking a dead-end corridor. And pressed against the far wall was a small Lanari cub with golden fur and wide amber eyes that were wet with tears. And the scene painted itself in Marcus's mind in the space between heartbeat slavers. He had seen their kind before. On a dozen stations and 100 worlds. The scavengers who preyed on the weak and the young and the lost. Who saw living beings as nothing more than cargo to be bought and sold. Hey, the word came out quiet. Almost casual, but every head in that corridor turned toward him. And the laughter that had been echoing off the walls died like a candle. Flame in a hurricane, Marcus stood at the mouth of the corridor with his hands loose at his sides and his weight balanced on the balls of his feet. And he looked at the 6 armed Vrexians the way a man might look at insects. Crawling across his kitchen floor, the Vrexian leader, a scarred and ugly creature with yellow teeth and red eyes, sized him up with the practiced gaze of a predator. "Walk away, soft skin," the leader said, his voice carrying the rasp of too many cigarettes and not enough conscience. "This is not your concern. Find somewhere else to be." Marcus did not move, did not blink, did not show any sign that he had heard the threat at all. "The cub is now under Earth's protection," he said, and his voice was calm in a way that made the youngest Vrexian take a step backward. "You have 5 seconds to leave." The leader laughed, but it was a nervous sound, forced and hollow. "You are one human," he said, gesturing at his pack. "There are 6 of us. We are armed. You have nothing. What do you think you are going to do?" Marcus smiled. And it was the kind of smile that belonged on a skull rather than a face. The kind of smile that said violence was coming, and he was looking forward to it. "I know there are 6 of you," Marcus said. "You might want to get more." The Vrexians exchanged glances, uncertain now, and Marcus could see the calculations running behind their eyes as they tried to figure out if this strange soft-skinned creature was bluffing or insane or something far more dangerous than he appeared. He used their hesitation to study them in return. The leader was the biggest, but he was also the oldest, and the scar on his snout suggested he had lost fights before. The 4 in the middle were average, hungry and mean but not experienced, the kind who relied on numbers rather than skill. And the one at the back was young, barely adult, trembling slightly in a way that said he had never faced real resistance. 6 against 1. Bad odds for most species in the galaxy. But Marcus was not most species. He was human. His people had crawled out of the mud of a planet that seemed designed to kill them, had survived ice ages and plagues and predators and each other, had learned to hunt not through speed or strength or natural weapons, but through something far more terrifying. Persistence, patience, the absolute refusal to stop coming until the prey was dead or the battle was won. Vrexians were ambush predators, built for quick strikes and overwhelming odds. And when those tactics failed, when the prey did not run, when the victim stood its ground and smiled like death itself, they did not know what to do. "Last chance," Marcus said, and his voice had dropped into a register that made even the bravest men nervous. "Walk away now, or I will hurt you in ways that your species does not have words for." Behind the Vrexians, the little Lanari cub was staring at him with something like hope in his amber eyes. And Marcus felt that look in his chest like a physical weight. This child was counting on him. This child had cried out for help, and Marcus had answered. And he would burn this entire station to ash before he let these animals take that cub anywhere. The Vrexian leader must have seen something in his eyes, because the creature's scarred snout wrinkled and his hand moved toward the knife at his belt. "Kill him," the leader said. "And then we take the cub and go. He's just one human." How hard can it be? The pack moved forward, spreading out to surround him, and Marcus felt his body shift into a state he had not visited in years. A state where thought and action became the same thing. where pain and fear and hesitation simply stopped existing, his daughters. Faces flashed through his mind, Emma with her mother's eyes and Sarah with her father's stubborn jaw, and then there was no more time for thinking. The first Resium lunged, and the corridor exploded into violence. Sketh had been a slaver for 30 years, and in that time he had learned to read threat the way other beings read words on screen. He knew how to measure danger by the length of claws, and the size of fangs and the number of bodies standing between him and his prey, and by every metric he understood. The human standing before him was nothing, soft skin that could be cut with a dull knife. No claws on those strange flat fingers, teeth that were barely worth mentioning. Small and blunt and useless, no natural armor, no venom. No spines or shells or any of the 1,000 defenses that evolution gave to species that wanted to survive. And he was alone. One creature against 6. Unarmed against beings who carried knives and clubs and the experience of 100 successful hunts. Sketh should have been laughing at this pathetic display of defiance. Instead, something cold was crawling up his spine. Something that felt uncomfortably like fear. The human had not moved since he appeared at the mouth of the corridor, had not shifted his weight or reached for a weapon or shown any of the signs that usually preceded violence. But there was something in his stillness that made Sketh's hackles rise. It was the way he stood, perfectly balanced, like a coiled spring waiting to release. It was the way he looked at 6 armed Vrexians with eyes that held no fear. No doubt, no uncertainty at all. It was the way he smiled when Sketh threatened him. A smile that said violence was not a possibility, but a promise. Somewhere in the depths of Sketh's memory, old stories stirred. Tales passed down through generations of Vrexian hunters about the creatures from the death world called Earth. They had called them softskins and laughed at their weakness. But the old ones had whispered warnings that the young ones ignored. They are persistence hunters, his grandmother had told him once, her voice low and serious. They do not need claws or fangs. They just follow their prey across mountains and deserts and through darkness and cold. They follow until their prey drops from exhaustion, and then they move in for the kill. They never stop coming, never. And that is what makes them the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Sketh had dismissed those stories as foolish superstition, the fears of old ones who had grown soft and timid in their age. Now, looking into the flat gray eyes of this single unarmed human, he was beginning to think his grandmother had not told him enough. "Walk away now," the human said, and his voice was quiet in a way that made Sketh's pack shift nervously. "Or, I will hurt you in ways that your species does not have words for." Sketh forced himself to laugh, forced himself to show his teeth in a display of dominance that felt hollow even as he made it. "Kill him," he said to his pack. Because what else could he say? What else could he do but commit to this course now that he had started it? And then we take the cub and go, he's just one human. How hard can it be? The pack moved forward, spreading out to surround the strange soft-skinned creature, and Sketh watched the human's eyes track each of them without ever leaving Sketh himself. That was wrong. That was not how prey was supposed to behave. Prey was supposed to panic when surrounded, supposed to make mistakes, supposed to show fear. The human showed nothing but patience. Crash. The youngest of the pack made the first move, lunging forward with the knife he kept in his belt, going for the human's throat in a strike that should have ended the fight before it began. The human move Sketh had seen fast creatures before, had hunted species that could cross a room in the blink of an eye. But he had never seen anything move the way this human moved. It was not about speed, not really. It was about efficiency, about knowing exactly where the attack was coming and being somewhere else when it arrived, about turning defense into offense in the space between heartbeats. The human caught Kresh's knife hand, twisted in a way that made joints scream and bones crack. And suddenly Kresh was on the ground shrieking, and the knife was in the human's hand, and everything had changed. "Anyone else?" the human asked. And his voice had not even quickened. His breath had not even grown short. He might have been asking about the weather. For all the effort he seemed to be exerting, Voss and Gretsch moved together. The twin brothers who had been with Sketh since the beginning. And they were experienced fighters who had killed more beings than they could remember. The human broke Voss's arm at the elbow and used the momentum to throw him into Gretsch. And while they were tangled together, he struck twice with the knife. Quick, precise cuts that opened flesh and sprayed blood across the corridor walls. 4 seconds since the fight began. And 3 of his pack were down. Sketh felt something he had not felt in decades. Pure animal terror. The knowledge that he was not the predator here. That he had never been the predator here. That he had walked into the territory of something far more dangerous than anything he had ever faced. The remaining 2 members of his pack, Thresh and Hollow, were frozen in place, their eyes wide and their breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The human looked at them, and Sketh saw something flicker in those gray eyes. Something that might have been mercy or might have been contempt. "Run," the human said. And it was not a threat. It was an offer, a chance to survive that Sketh knew they did not deserve. Thresh ran. Dropping his weapon and fleeing down the corridor without looking back, Hollow tried to run. But his legs gave out, and he collapsed against the wall, weeping. And then it was just Sketh. Just him and the human and the little Lanari cub, who was watching everything with those wide amber eyes. "I am going to give you one chance," the human said. And he dropped the bloody knife to the ground with a clatter that echoed in the sudden silence. "One chance because I am trying to be a better person than I used to be. One chance because there is a child watching, and I do not want him to see more than he already has. Walk away, and never let me see your face again." Sketh should have taken the offer. He should have swallowed his pride and walked away and counted himself lucky to be alive. But 30 years of being the predator, 30 years of never backing down, 30 years of taking what he wanted from creatures weaker than himself, had built habits that he could not break, even when his survival depended on it. He lunged for the human's throat, claws extended, teeth bared, putting everything he had into one final desperate attack. The human sighed. It was a sad sound. Disappointed. Like a teacher watching a student fail a test they should have passed easily. And then the human's hands were around Sketh's throat, and his feet were off the ground. And he was staring into eyes that held nothing but cold, patient certainty. "I really hoped you would take the offer," the human said, and then there was only pain. The fight lasted 12 seconds. Caravel would remember that number for the rest of his life. Would carry it with him through all the years that followed. Because in those 12 seconds, everything he thought he knew about the universe was proven wrong. He had been taught that strength was measured in claws and fangs and size. That the biggest creature was the most dangerous. That species without natural weapons were prey and nothing more. The human had no claws, no fangs, no armor. Nothing but soft skin and flat teeth, and those strange pale eyes that seemed to see everything at once. And yet the Vrexians had moved first, confident in their numbers and their weapons and their experience. And the human had moved second, but somehow he was always in the right place at the right time. Always one step ahead, always turning their attacks into opportunities. He watched the human catch a knife out of the air and use it against its owner in a single, fluid motion. He watched the human break bones with strikes that looked almost gentle, efficient and precise and utterly devastating. He watched the human face the pack leader, the biggest and meanest of them all, and offer him a chance to walk away. A chance the Vrexian was too stupid or too proud to take. And then he watched the human end it. The pack leader lunged, and the human moved. And suddenly, the Vrexian was on the ground, with his arm bent the wrong way, and his face pressed against the cold metal floor, screaming in a way that said he would never use that arm again. 12 seconds, 6 Rexians, all of them down. Groaning and bleeding and broken, scattered across the corridor like leaves after a storm, the human stood among them, breathing only slightly harder than before. And Kira could see blood on his hands, but none of it was his own. All of it belonged to the creatures who had tried to take him, who had laughed at his roar, who had thought a child's fear was something to mock. Then the human turned toward him, and Kira felt his heart stop. Would this creature hurt him too? Was this just a predator eliminating competition? Was he trading one kind of monster for another? But the human's face changed. The cold efficiency melted away like ice under sunlight. And what was left was tired and kind and somehow gentle. And the human knelt down so that they were at the same eye level and held out one of those strange clawless hands. "Hey, little one," the human said, and his voice was soft now. Nothing like the cold, flat tone he had used with the Rexians. "You are safe now. I've got you. No one is going to hurt you. I promise." Kira wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to curl up in a ball and pretend none of this had happened. Instead, he found himself moving forward, found himself reaching for that offered hand, found himself letting this strange, soft-skinned creature pull him into an embrace that was warmer and safer than anything he had ever felt. He started crying then, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body, and the human just held him, one hand stroking the fur on his back the way Kira's father used to do when he was small and scared. "It is okay," the human murmured. "Let it out. You are safe. I have got you. They were going to take me," Kira managed to say between sobs. "They were going to sell me. I was so scared. I called for help, but no one came. I thought no one was going to come. I came," the human said simply. "I heard you, and I came. That is what we do." "Why?" Kira asked, looking up at this creature who had just torn through 6 armed slavers like they were nothing. "You do not know me. I am not your kind. Why did you help me?" The human was quiet for a moment, and something sad flickered across his face. "I have 2 daughters," he said finally, "back on a world called Mars, and every time I see a scared child, any child, I see them. I see their faces. And there is nothing in the universe that could stop me from helping." He pulled back slightly and looked at Kira with those strange gray eyes that had held such coldness for the Rexians, but now held only warmth. "My name is Marcus," the human said. "What is yours?" "Kiravel," he answered. "My father calls me Kira." "Okay, Kira," Marcus said, standing up but keeping one hand on Kira's shoulder. "Let us get you somewhere safe, and then we will find your father. I bet he's worried sick about you." "The human embassy," Kira said. Remembering his father's words, my father said to go there if we got separated. He said humans always protect children. Marcus smiled, and this time it was a real smile, warm and genuine. "Your father is a smart man," he said. "Come on. I know the way." They stepped over the groaning bodies of the Rexians, and Kira noticed that Marcus positioned himself between the fallen slavers and Kira, shielding him with his body, even though the threat had passed. "What will happen to them?" Kira asked, looking back at the broken pack. "Station security will pick them up," Marcus said. "They will face charges for attempted kidnapping. Probably get shipped off to a prison colony somewhere. They will not hurt anyone else for a very long time." "Good," Kira said. And he was surprised by the anger in his own voice. Marcus glanced down at him and nodded. "Yeah," he agreed. "Good." They walked through the corridors together, the human and the lion cub. And Kira noticed that other beings moved out of their way. Noticed the looks of fear and respect that followed Marcus wherever he went. He had thought humans were weak, had thought the stories about them were exaggerations. He would never make that mistake again. 3 months later, on a Rexian den ship drifting through the outer rim, The story had become legend. Thresh told it first. The one who had run when the human offered mercy. And his voice shook as he described what he had seen in that maintenance corridor. 6 armed Rexians against 1 unarmed human. And the human had won in the time it took to draw 3 breaths. He described the way the soft skin moved. Efficient and patient and utterly without fear. He described the sound of bones breaking, the spray of blood against metal walls, the screams of packmates who had never screamed before. He described the look in the human's eyes, the cold certainty of a creature that knew exactly how dangerous it was and was choosing, moment by moment, how much of that danger to unleash. The other Rexians listened. And at first they did not believe humans were weak. Everyone knew that. Soft and slow and harmless. The jokes of the galaxy, creatures that had somehow stumbled into space despite having no natural weapons at all. But then more stories came. A human cargo hauler who had fought off a boarding party of 8 raiders using nothing but a fire extinguisher and a length of pipe. A human diplomat who had walked into a hostage situation and walked out 10 minutes later carrying 2 rescued children. While the hostage takers were loaded into ambulances, a human grandmother, 60 years old and barely reaching the chest of a Rexian adult, who had beaten 3 muggers unconscious with her walking cane when they threatened her grandchildren. The stories piled up, one after another, until even the most skeptical Rexians had to admit that something strange was happening. "They are from a death world," old Gratha said. She who had survived longer than any other Rexian on the ship. A world of ice and fire and endless violence, where the land shakes and the sky throws lightning and the water rises to swallow cities whole. They evolved not to be the biggest or the fastest or the strongest, but to be the most stubborn, the most persistent, the ones who simply refuse to die no matter what the universe throws at them. But why do they fight for others? Young Vetch asked. The human at Nexus Prime, he was not protecting his own cub. It was a Lenari, a different species entirely. Why would he risk his life for something not his own blood? Gratha was quiet for a long moment. "That," she said finally, "is what makes them truly terrifying. They do not protect children because of blood or tribe or species. They protect children because something in their very nature screams at them to shield the young, all young, any young. It is written into their DNA by millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill them every single day." She looked around at the assembled Rexians, at the hunters and raiders and slavers who had once thought themselves the top of the food chain. "When a human hears a child cry out in fear," Gratha said, "something ancient wakes up inside them, something from the deep past when they were small and weak and surrounded by predators that should have eaten them 1,000 times over. They do not think, they do not calculate, they do not weigh the odds, they just act, and when they act, they become something that no sane creature should ever want to face." The pack leader, Sketh's successor, a scarred female named Krath, stood up from her chair and looked at her pack with serious eyes. "New rules," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Human children are off limits. Children under human protection are off limits. And any corridor where a human walks alone is to be treated as the territory of an apex predator. We are retreating," one of the younger Rexians said, disbelief in his voice, from softskins, from creatures without claws. Krath moved faster than the eye could follow, and suddenly the young Rexian was on the ground with her foot on his throat. "We are surviving," she said, "which is more than Sketh and his pack are doing in their prison cells." Broken and beaten by a single human who was not even trying, she stepped back and let the young one rise. Coughing and gasping, "The galaxy is full of prey," Krath said. "There is no need to hunt the ones that can hunt back on a world called Earth." Marcus Cole received a message from a Lenari trading vessel. It was from a young cub named Kiravel, now safely returned to his family. And attached to the message was a document written in the formal style of Lanari nobility, a declaration of life debt, binding Kira and his descendants to Marcus and his line for 7 generations. Marcus's daughters read the message over his shoulder and demanded the whole story. And when he was done telling it, they looked at him with the same expression their mother used to wear pride that night. Marcus sat on his porch and looked up at the stars. And somewhere out there he knew a golden-furred cub was looking at the same stars and thinking of the human who had heard his cry and answered. The galaxy was vast and old and full of wonders and terrors. But there was one truth that species across 1,000 worlds were slowly learning. Humans did not look like predators. They did not have the claws or the fangs or the natural weapons that marked the dangerous species. But when a child cried out in fear, when the innocent needed protection, when the weak were threatened by the strong, something ancient and terrible woke up in those soft-skinned creatures from the death world called Earth. And when humans roared, the pack fell silent, because the most dangerous creature in the universe was not the one with the sharpest claws. It was the one that fought for something beyond itself. And humans had been fighting for each other since before they came down from the trees, since before they learned to speak, since before they looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. They would never stop. That was the human way, and the galaxy was finally learning to respect it. The end.